The heavy metal door slammed behind Zara with a clang that reverberated down the dingy corridor of the space station. She flinched at the sound, her heart pounding as she glanced over her shoulder. Footsteps echoed menacingly in the distance, and she quickened her pace, scales prickling with fear. Zara didn't have many places to hide on Archelon Station. As a member of the scorned Rin species, she was unwanted pretty much everywhere. She'd have to be careful. One wrong turn and she could wander into the territory of the dreaded Gara gang. Her brutes would show her no mercy. She made her way deeper into the station's underground tunnels, sticking to the shadows. All around her, stark metal walls curved oppressively inward, the dim fluorescent lights flickering overhead. Zara pulled her tattered shawl tighter as she walked, keenly aware of every ominous creak and groan of the aging station. After what felt like an eternity of tense silence, she reached a familiar bulkhead door and punched into code with a trembling hand. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a low-ceilinged but surprisingly cozy living compartment. A dozen or so mismatched chairs and benches were arranged in a haphazard circle, occupied by a small group of alien teens of various species. This was the Haven, a secret shelter for those who had nowhere else to go. As Zara entered, all eyes turned to her. Zara. Her best friend Kalo shot up from his seat, ears perking in alarm at her disheveled appearance. The young Caprican bounded over, hooves clattering on the metal floor. "What happened? Are you hurt?" Zara shook her head, trying to steady her ragged breathing. "I'm okay. The gills just jumped me again on my way back from work." She pulled her shawl aside, revealing the tattered remains of her shirt and the vivid bruises already blooming across her scaled torso. A collective murmur of anger rippled through the group. Those gill-brained punks had gone too far this time. A gruff voice growled. Zara looked up to see Bors, the eldest of their group at 17 cycles, rising to his powerful feet. The massive hulk of an alien cracked his knuckles, his fur bristled. "We can't keep letting them push us around like this. It's time we showed those thugs what happens when you frail with the Haven crew." Zara's heart sank. "Bors, no, we're no match for the gills. Fighting back will only make it worse." She was the newest addition to their makeshift family, but Zara had quickly learned that the Heaven's philosophy was non-violence and self-preservation at all costs. Most of them were runaways or survivors of war, famine, and displacement. They had suffered enough trauma already without looking for more trouble. Bors snorted, unconvinced. "So we're supposed to just cower in the shadows forever while those punks run Archelon? I didn't leave the prison mines of Zara to live in fear." "He's right." Zara turned as a new voice spoke up. Vernie, a wary Signarian with feathers of steel gray, was perched on the arm of a battered sofa. Though her vast avian wings were tightly furled, she still managed to look regal and formidable. "We can't keep hiding in the shadows. This is our home, and it's time we started defending it." Vernie's piercing gaze swept over each of them in turn. "The gills only push us around because they don't see us as a threat. Maybe it's time we change that." The room erupted in tense debate, old wounds and hot-headed tempers flaring. Zara could feel them teetering on the edge of an irreversible decision that could make their harsh lives even harder. She had to try to make them see reason. "Vernie, Bors and I respect you, but if we openly defy the gills, they'll destroy us. Our only hope is to keep our heads down until..." "Until what?" Bors rounded on her, his beady black eyes smoldering. "Until those thugs get bored of torturing us. Until we turn old and gray living like rats in these tunnels." He shook his head in disgust. "I'm not going to wait around for their scraps and be grateful. We're better than that." His words pierced Zara's hearts. In the mines of Zagora, she had indeed waited for scraps and worse, enduring torture and humiliation just to survive. The memories choked her until all she could do was hold Bors's furious gaze. "You're right," she heard herself say, her voice cracking. "We are better than that." A heavy silence fell over the Haven as they all digested the implications of Zara's statement. Was she really advocating they stand up against the dreaded Gil gang that ruled Archelon with an iron fist? Kalo's eyes widened in alarm. "Zara, listen to yourself. We can't." But she shook her head, cutting him off as new determination flooded her veins. "Not today. Not tomorrow. But someday, my friend. Someday soon, this has to stop." As the words left her mouth, Zara felt something inside her harden and crystallize. She was done being a victim, done being too afraid to stand up for herself and those she cared for. The Haven crew deserved better, and if no one else would defend them, she would. For the next few days, a subtle shift took place in the atmosphere of the Haven. Zara noticed the lingering looks, the weight of unspoken words hanging in the air. The desire to fight back was spreading like a virus through their ranks. Kalo seemed increasingly anxious, his tail swishing in agitation whenever heated discussions erupted. Even little Pip, the excitable Zabrak child whose sunny disposition was usually infectious, had turned pensive and brief. Zara felt her own apprehension growing too. Not about facing the Gills, but about the cost of provoking them. If the Gills decided to bring the full force of their brutality upon the Haven, it could break them once and for all. Years of hard-won trust and community could be torn apart in an instant. Still, she couldn't logic away her burning need to act. Sure enough, the breaking point came soon after an intense late-night meeting. Vernie strode into the Haven's common room, jaw set and feathers ruffled. "I just got word. The Lashers paid off the station manager to have us expelled," she announced grimly. "He says we have 3 cycles to gather our things and get off Archelon." Angry shouts erupted from around the room as the news sank in. "They can't do this to us. This is our home. Over my dead body." Zara watched it all unfold with a sense of inevitability. The Gills were trying to tighten the noose, to squeeze them out of existence. Well, not this time. "Enough," she raised her voice, quieting in the tumult. "Vernie's right. They want us gone, but we're not going anywhere." Zara's gaze swept over each of her friends, her makeshift family. "Not without a fight, at least. Who's with me?" Or beat. The room was utterly silent save for the thrumming of the station's atmospheric recyclers. Then Boris stepped forward, bristling and battle-ready as ever. "You know I've got your back, see?" he rumbled. One by one, each member of the Haven crew stepped up to stand with them. Vernie's steely wings unfurling, Kylo squaring his wiry shoulders, even little Pip clenching her fists with determination far beyond her years. And the Lashers want to frail around. Bors's voice was a low growl now. "It's time we showed them what a bad idea that is. No more hiding, no more fear." He bared his sharp fangs in a mirthless grin. "This is our station. They just live here." Zara felt a surge of adrenaline and optimism she hadn't experienced in years. For the first time since she could remember, she was truly part of something. A family, a cause worth fighting for. She beamed at her misfit crew, knowing in that moment they could overcome anything together. Over the next few cycles, the Haven was a hive of strategy and planning. They stockpiled supplies, trained for confrontations, and scouted the station for key intel on the Guild's movements and operations. Bors did weapons training with any willing members, while Vernie focused on stealth, evasion, and reconnaissance. Kalo, still dubious about the whole enterprise, repeatedly pulled Zara aside to plead with her. "Z, I'm begging you, stop this before it goes too far. We're in over our heads here." But Zara had made up her mind. "This is the only way, Kalo. I can't spend another cycle cowering in fear or being terrorized by those thugs." He shook his head, ears flicking in frustration. "Even if we win this fight, we're just asking for endless retaliation and violence." His voice softened, becoming tinged with sadness and fear. "After everything we've survived, I don't want to lose you to some dumb war with the Gills." The raw emotion in his eyes made Zara's heart clench. She reached out to clasp his forearm, her scales brushing against his soft fur. "You won't lose me, Kalo. I promise. This is our chance to finally stand up and change things for good. No more run." He let out a defeated snort, but said nothing more. In his silence, Zara could see he'd already accepted her choice. She just prayed it wouldn't get them all killed. Soon, too soon, everything was in place. The Haven's ragtag crew devised a plan to strike the first blow against the Guild's operation, to send a clear message. Archelon Station belonged to all inhabitants, not just them. While risky, it was carefully calculated, with multiple exit strategies and fallback positions. Zara tried to keep fear from consuming her as the appointed night drew near. No turning back now. Under cover of darkness, the Haven crew crept silently through the dank, shadowy corridors of the station's lower levels. Zara's heart thundered in her ears with each step as she tried to keep her breathing quiet and easy. She felt a presence at her side and glanced over to see Kalo giving her a reassuring nod, his liquid brown eyes shining in the dim glow of the corridor lamps. Despite his misgivings, He was with her until the end. Up ahead, a bank of heavy crates loomed into view, stacked precariously toward the ceiling. Boris shot Zara a toothy grin and produced a compact detonator from his pocket with a wink. She swallowed hard and nodded her approval. Boris entered a code on the device and a silent countdown began. He slipped it onto the bottom crate, then quickly backed away, ushering the group to take cover around a bend in the hallway. Zara pressed herself flat against the cold metal wall, squeezing her eyes shut and clamping her hands over her ears. The explosion was deafening, even through her precautions. The crates burst apart in a thunderous boom, scattering debris and choking smoke everywhere. Giddy shouts of victory erupted from the crew, but Zara felt her stomach lurch. This was only the beginning. Sure enough, klaxon alarms began to blare throughout the station, cutting through the chaos. Spotlights snapped on, bathing the wreckage in harsh white glare. Heavy footsteps pounded toward them as shouts rang out. Over there. It came from over there. Fernie surged forward, sweeping Zara and the others along with her wings. Go, go. Fallback position, bravo. Let's... The crew scattered, fleeing through the smoke and confusion as the gills swarmed in behind them with blinding light and shouted orders. Half running, half flying, Zara ducked and wove through the narrow corridors in blind panic. She couldn't lose the others, couldn't let Kalo down. Up ahead, Fernie halted them at a cross corridor, her steely feathers bristling. This way, quick, she barked, gesturing toward a supply closet. One by one, they piled in, crouching in the cramped darkness as the commotion outside reached a fever pitch. Zara felt Kalo's trembling form press against her, and she gripped his forearm tightly. The door rattled violently as something heavy slammed against it from outside. There were shouts and muffled scuffling before a harsh, electronically modulated voice blared from a speaker system. Attention Arkelon inhabitants. This station is now under lockdown by order of the Gara Syndicate. Any unauthorized personnel found in restricted areas will be met with maximum force. The voice droned on, but Zara stopped listening as a primal chill rippled down her scales. They'd walked right into the Gills trap. Of course they were expecting retaliation after the ultimatum. This entire diversion was just a way to flush the haven out with minimum effort. Kalo met her gaze into darkness, his eyes full of fear and reproach. Zara, what have we done? She gripped his arm with renewed ferocity as dread slithered through her veins. She was their leader, yet she'd led them all to disaster. If they survived this, that is. No, that was unacceptable. She would get them out of this mess, whatever it took. The pounding on the door intensified as the Gills tried to break through. Zara's mind raced. They were sitting ducks trapped in this closet. She had to think of a way out. Fernie, she hissed, catching the Signarian's intense gaze in the darkness. Can you get a look outside and find us an escape route? We need to get out of this corridor now. Fernie gave a terse nod and began quietly shifting her steel-gray wings, inching the door open a crack. She went still for a beat, eyes narrowing as she assessed the situation. Then she turned back to the group, her expression grim. It's no good out there. Place is swarming with Gills, and they've got every exit covered. If we so much as poke our snouts out, we're done for. A heavy silence fell over the cramped closet, suffocating in its hopelessness. This was it, Zara realized with a cold finality. They'd fought, but the Gills had won. She closed her eyes, mentally preparing herself and her friends for whatever came next. At least they tried to resist, Wait. Kalo spoke up, his voice barely above a whisper. What about the old transit tunnels, from before Arkelon was recommissioned as a station? Zara's eyes snapped open as realization washed over her. Of course. The disused operations tunnels honeycombing the station's core. If they could access them, they'd have a way to slip past the Gills' security cordon undetected. A crack of hope blossomed in her chest. Kalo, you're a genius, she breathed. Everyone listen up. As quietly as possible, Zara outlined her new plan, feeding off each crew member's nod and spark of determination. By the time she finished, a new sense of purpose and optimism bound them all together once more. They could still pull off a win, against all odds. Steeling herself, Zara waited until the pounding on the door and shouts from the Gills reached a new fever pitch. Then, without warning, she slammed her shoulder into the door, busting it open and spilling out into the corridor in a tangle of limbs and scales as the stunned Gills cried out in surprise. Boris seized the moment. Bellowing a guttural war cry as he surged forward in a whirlwind of fangs and claws. The Haven crew erupted into chaos, stamping down the corridor as boars laid waste to their pursuers. Smoke grenades were lobbed, tangling the gills in obscuring clouds as Zara ushered her friends toward a dimly lit offshoot corridor. They sprinted wildly, following Kalo's lead deeper into the ancient transit tunnels adjoining the main station. Metal grates clanged beneath their feet as they scrambled over disused conduits and obsolete power lines. The gills' shouts faded into the distance, replaced only by the ragged gasps of the exhausted crew as they ran for their lives. At last, Zara motioned for them to halt, collapsing against a rusted bulkhead as she caught her breath. One by one, the others slumped against the curved tunnel walls, wheezing and bleary-eyed but gloriously alive. She smiled at Kalo, who returned a tired but relieved grin. "Didn't know you had it in you to pull off stunts like that," he panted between breaths. Zara shrugged, suddenly feeling the weight of her responsibility like a heavy mantle. "Let's just say I've had some experience with crazy no-win scenarios." Horse threw back his head and unleashed a triumphant roar that echoed eerily through the tunnel network. "That's how it's done. Haven style. Those gills won't be forgetting this beatdown anytime soon." A ragged cheer went up from the group, their apparent victory sending their spirits soaring. As the cheering subsided, Verney leveled a considering look at Zara. "Well, fearless leader, what's our next move? Lay low for a while or—" Zara considered Verney's question, her mind racing. Part of her wanted nothing more than to disappear into the tunnels and never resurface, to find a new life away from the gills' reach. But a larger part, the part that had led her friends into this chaos, knew she couldn't stop now, but not when they'd finally tasted defiance. "We're not done yet," she said, straightening her shoulders with renewed determination. "The gills think they've won, that we're crushed, but we're just getting started." Emboldened by her friend's nods of support, she pressed on. This was a victory, but a small one. "We struck a blow, showed them we have claws, but it'll take much more than that to actually change things on this station." Zara met each of their eyes in turn, seeing the strength and hunger for more mirrored back at her. "I don't know about you, but I'm tired of living in fear, of being dehumanized by those thugs. Aren't you?" She was met with growls and mutters of assent. Boris pounded a massive fist into his other palm, his fangs bared. "You're damn right we are. Time to take our home back." "Then it's settled," Zara declared, fresh vigor coursing through her veins. "We're going underground for now, disappearing from the gills' sensors. But we'll be watching, planning, preparing to strike again and again, until they get the message loud and clear." Kalo blinked at her, a trace of worry creasing his brow. "You want to start a rebellion against the entire Garrus syndicate?" Zara nodded solemnly. "That's exactly what I want. Because if we don't stand up and fight for ourselves, no one will. Who's with me?" A chorus of cheers and raised fists answered her call to arms. Even Kalo, after a moment's hesitation, let out a whoop of exhilaration, his eyes shining. "To the revolution!" Boars roared, and the cry was taken up by the entire crew, echoing defiantly through the abandoned tunnels. As the cheers faded into laughter and backslapping, Zara allowed herself a small, fierce smile. She had come to Archelon Station as a refugee, an outcast with no hope. But now, she had found a new family, a noble purpose to devote herself to fully. No matter how long or hard the struggle, she would lead the Haven crew to victory over their oppressors. The Gills' reign of terror over the station was ending. A new power was rising from the shadows, unified and unafraid. Zara and her rebels were just getting started.